I never thought I'd be the kind of man who tested his wife. 62 years on this earth, 40 years married to Clara, and still I set a trap. What I found that October night didn't just break my heart. It showed me who I'd been sleeping next to for 4 decades. The wife I thought I knew vanished the moment I walked through that door 3 days early from a business trip I never actually took. I faked my departure, kissed her goodbye at dawn, drove around the block twice, then parked my truck behind our neighbor's barn where the oak branches hung low enough to hide it. For 3 days, I stayed at a motel 6 miles from our home, eating cold sandwiches and staring at my phone, wondering if I was crazy, wondering if the signs I'd ignored for months meant anything at all. Clara had been distant lately. Not angry, just absent. She'd hum while folding laundry but wouldn't meet my eyes. She'd cook my favorite meals, then barely touch her own plate. When I reached for her hand during our evening walks, she let me hold it, but her fingers stayed limp, like she was tolerating affection instead of returning it. My buddy Marcus noticed it too when we had them over for dinner. He pulled me aside by the grill and said, "Your wife looks haunted, Bill. Everything all right?" I lied and told him she was tired. But that word haunted stuck with me, because it was exactly right. Clara looked like she was being followed by something I couldn't see. The breaking point came 2 weeks before my fake trip. I came home early from the hardware store and heard her on the phone in our bedroom. The door was half closed, but her voice carried through. She was laughing. Really laughing. The kind of bright, unguarded sound I hadn't heard from her in months. I froze in the hallway. She said, I know. It's dangerous, but I can't help it anymore. I feel alive again." Then silence, then softer, almost a whisper. "He doesn't suspect a thing." My chest tightened, the wood floor creaked under my boot, and the laughing stopped instantly. When I pushed the door open, she was sitting on the edge of our bed holding her cell phone against her chest, eyes wide. I asked who was that, and she said just Sarah from book club, talking about some novel, "Why are you home?" Her voice was smooth, but her knuckles were white around that phone. I let it go that day. Told myself I was paranoid. Told myself 40 years of marriage earned some trust. But the doubt planted itself deep and grew roots I couldn't pull out. So I planned the test. Told Clara I had a 3-day regional sales training in Columbus, something boring and mandatory. She nodded and said, "Okay, honey," without looking up from her crossword. No questions, no disappointment, nothing. Before I continue, you need to subscribe to Deserved Revenge, because what I'm about to reveal will shock you. Hit that subscribe button now. The morning I left, she was cheerful, almost relieved. Made me eggs and bacon, packed me a lunch I'd never eat, kissed my cheek at the door. "Drive safe, William. See you Thursday." I watched her in the rearview mirror as I pulled away. She stood on the porch, waving until I turned the corner. Then she dropped her hand and went inside fast, like she had somewhere to be. Those 3 days in that motel were the longest of my life. Stained carpet, thin walls, a window facing the parking lot where semis growled past all night. I barely slept. Kept imagining what Clara might be doing. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe she was just tired like I'd told Marcus. Maybe the phone call was innocent. But I couldn't silence the voice that said, "Come home early, Bill. See for yourself." So on Wednesday evening, 1 day before I was supposed to return, I checked out of that miserable room and drove home. The sun was setting, painting our little farmhouse in shades of amber and rust. Everything looked peaceful. Clara's car in the driveway, porch light on. Smoke curling from the chimney because October nights get cold out here. I parked down the road and walked the last quarter mile through the field, boots crunching through dry corn stalks. My hands were shaking as I reached the back door. Not from cold, from fear. Fear that I'd open it and find nothing. That I'd wasted 3 days doubting a woman who loved me. Or worse, fear that I'd find exactly what I suspected and my whole life would crack in half. I stood there for a full minute with my hand on the doorknob, listening. I could hear voices inside. Low, muffled. Then Clara's laugh again. That same bright sound from the phone call. My stomach turned. I twisted the knob slowly. The door wasn't locked. I stepped into the mudroom, careful not to let my boots thud on the tile. The voices were coming from the living room just beyond the kitchen. I moved through the shadows, heart hammering so loud I thought they'd hear it. Then I saw them. Clara sitting on our couch. And next to her, close enough that their knees touched, was a man I'd never seen before. Younger than me by maybe 15 years, dark hair going silver at the temples, wearing a sweater I would never wear, something soft and expensive looking. He had his hand on her shoulder and she was leaning into him, smiling up at his face like he'd just said the most wonderful thing. On the coffee table between them sat 2 glasses of red wine and a photo album I recognized. Our wedding album. They were looking at pictures of me and Clara on our wedding day 40 years ago. The man said something I couldn't quite hear and Clara laughed again, then said, "I know, it feels like a different lifetime." He squeezed her shoulder gently and replied, "Maybe it's time to start a new one." I stepped out of the shadows. The floorboard creaked under my weight. Both their heads snapped toward me. Clara's face went white. The man stood up fast, confusion tightening his features. For a moment nobody spoke. The only sound was the fire crackling in the hearth and my own ragged breathing. Then Clara whispered, "William, oh my God, what are you doing here?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was terrified. I looked from her to the stranger and back again. My mouth was dry. I tried to form words, but all that came out was a rough question. "Who is he?" Clara stood up slowly, hands out like she was approaching a spooked animal. "William, please, let me explain. This isn't what it looks like." The man cleared his throat and said maybe I should go, and I finally found my voice. "Don't move." He froze. I looked at my wife, the woman I'd spent 4 decades building a life with, and asked again, slower this time, "Who is he, Clara?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Then she said something that made the room tilt. "William, this is Daniel. He's my son." I stared at her. The words didn't make sense. We don't have a son. We never could. Clara was told at 23, after a surgery, that she'd never carry a child. It was the one sorrow that shadowed our marriage, the quiet grief we learned to live with. We talked about adoption once, but life got busy, and we convinced ourselves we were enough for each other. So hearing her say this is my son felt like a joke, some cruel prank I wasn't in on. I shook my head. "What are you talking about?" Clara's tears finally spilled over. She sat back down hard on the couch and covered her face with her hands. The man, Daniel, looked at me with something like pity. He said, "Mr. William, I think you should sit down. This is going to be difficult to hear." But I didn't sit. I stood there in my own living room feeling like a stranger while my wife cried into her palms and this man who claimed to be her son prepared to unravel everything I thought I knew. What I discovered in the next hour still haunts me. I didn't sit. My legs wouldn't bend. Daniel gestured toward the armchair across from the couch, but I stayed standing, boots still muddy from the field, coat still buttoned. Clara kept her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking. The fire popped and sent a spray of embers against the screen. Finally I said it again, slower, trying to force the words to make sense. "We don't have a son." Clara lowered her hands. Her face was blotched red, eyes swollen. She looked older suddenly, like the weight of whatever secret she'd been carrying had aged her in seconds. She took a breath that rattled in her chest and said, "You're right, William. We don't have a son. I have a son. Before I met you." The room swayed. I gripped the back of the nearest chair to steady myself. "Before me? You told me there was no one serious before me." She nodded slowly. "There wasn't. Not serious. Just a boy I knew for one summer when I was 17. My parents sent me to stay with my aunt in Tennessee that year because I was," she hesitated, "getting into trouble. I met someone. It happened once. I got pregnant." Her voice cracked on that last word. I felt my jaw tighten. "You never told me." She shook her head. "I couldn't. By the time I realized I was pregnant, it was too late to do anything but hide it. My parents were furious, ashamed. They sent me to a home for unwed mothers upstate. I had the baby in March. A boy. I held him for maybe 10 minutes before they took him away. I signed the papers. He was adopted. I was told I'd never see him again." Daniel spoke then, his voice calm and steady. like he'd rehearsed this. "I found her 6 months ago. I hired a service to trace my birth mother." It wasn't easy, but I got Clara's name, tracked down an address. I wrote her a letter. She didn't respond at first. I tried again. Finally, she called me. "We've been meeting for coffee, talking, trying to." He paused. "Figure out what this means." I turned to Clara. 6 months? You've been seeing him for 6 months and you didn't think to tell me? She stood up, reaching toward me. "William, please. I didn't know how. I was so scared. Scared I'd lose you. Scared you'd think I lied to you all these years." I did lie. By not telling you. But I thought that part of my life was buried. I thought I'd never have to face it again. And then he showed up and everything I'd pushed down came flooding back. I stepped away from her outstretched hand. The betrayal wasn't just that she had a son. It was that she'd built a whole secret relationship with him while I sat across the dinner table every night believing we told each other everything. I looked at Daniel. He stood there uncomfortable, hands in his pockets, watching this marriage crack apart in front of him. I asked, "What do you want?" He blinked. "I'm sorry? What do you want from her? From us?" Daniel's face softened. "I don't want anything except to know where I came from. I grew up with good parents, a good life. But there was always this gap, you know? This feeling that part of my story was missing. When I found Clara, it wasn't about money or revenge or anything like that. I just wanted to meet her, to understand." Clara sat back down and said, "He deserves that, William. He deserves to know me. And her voice broke, I want to know him. I spent 43 years wondering if he was okay, if he was happy, if he ever thought about me. Now he's here, and I can't just pretend he doesn't exist." I felt something ugly twist in my chest. "So where does that leave me?" She looked up at me, confused. "What do you mean? I mean, where do I fit in this? You've been sneaking around with your secret son for half a year, having wine on our couch, looking at our wedding photos. What was the plan, Clara? Were you ever going to tell me, or was I just supposed to find out like this?" She flinched. "I was going to tell you. I swear I was. I just needed time to figure out how." Daniel cleared his throat again. "Maybe I really should go. This feels like something you two need to work out alone." But Clara grabbed his wrist. "No, please don't. You just got here." She looked at me with desperation. "William, please, sit down. Let's talk about this. Let me explain everything. If you're still with me, you won't believe what happens next. Drop a comment below with your country so I know you're here." I finally sat, not because I wanted to, but because my legs gave out. The chair felt too soft, like I might sink into it and disappear. Clara poured me a glass of water from the pitcher on the side table. I didn't drink it. She sat across from me, Daniel beside her, and began to talk. She told me about that summer in Tennessee, about the boy, a farmhand named Jonas, who worked on her aunt's property. How they met by the creek one afternoon and spent 3 months together before her parents found out and dragged her home. How she never saw him again. How the pregnancy was a nightmare of shame and secrecy. How the birth was fast and painful and lonely. How she held her baby boy and memorized his face before the nurse took him and she never got to say goodbye. She said for years I dreamed about him, wondered if he had my eyes or Jonas's smile, if he was safe, if his new parents loved him. And then I met you, William, and you were so kind, so steady. You loved me even when I told you I couldn't have children. You never pushed. You never made me feel broken. I thought I could bury that part of my life and just be your wife. And I was happy. I swear I was. But the guilt never left. And when Daniel's letter came, it was like the past reached through the mailbox and grabbed me by the throat. I didn't know what to do, so I wrote back. We met. And he was. She looked at Daniel with tears streaming again. He was everything I'd hoped. Smart, kind, gentle. Meeting him didn't erase the pain, but it gave me something I didn't know I needed. Closure, maybe, or just proof that he turned out okay despite me giving him away. I stared at her. You didn't give him away. You were 17. Your parents made that choice. She shook her head. I signed the papers, William. I let him go. I've carried that for 43 years. Daniel reached over and took her hand. You were a kid. You did what you had to do. I don't blame you. I never did. I looked at their hands intertwined and felt a sharp stab of something I didn't want to name. Jealousy, maybe. Or grief. The idea that this stranger knew a version of Clara I'd never met. The girl who got pregnant at 17. The mother who gave up her child. I'd spent 40 years thinking I knew every corner of my wife's heart, but there was a whole room I'd never been allowed into. I asked, "Why didn't you tell me when his first letter came?" Clara pulled her hand back from Daniel's and folded both in her lap. "Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd be angry. Afraid you'd think I didn't trust you. And maybe I didn't trust myself. I didn't know if I was ready to open that door. So I kept it secret, and the longer I waited, the harder it got to say anything. Every time I came home from meeting Daniel, I wanted to tell you. But then you'd smile at me or ask about my day and I'd chicken out. I became a liar without meaning to. I felt the anger rise again. So tonight, what was this? Showing him our wedding album? Drinking wine on the couch? What would have happened if I hadn't come home early?" She looked down. "We were just talking. He wanted to know about my life. About you. I was telling him how we met. How happy we've been. There's nothing sordid happening, William. He's my son. That's all." But the way she said it, the tenderness in her voice when she looked at Daniel, made me wonder if I'd already lost her. Not to an affair, to something deeper. A bond I could never compete with because it was written in blood and regret and 43 years of longing. Daniel stood up. "I think I've caused enough trouble for one night." Clara tried to protest, but he shook his head. "No, he's right. This is between you two. I shouldn't have come tonight. I'm sorry, Mr. William. I didn't mean to hurt you." He headed for the door, and Clara followed him. I stayed in the chair, staring at the fire. I heard them talking in low voices by the door. Heard Clara say, "Please don't disappear on me. We'll figure this out." Heard Daniel say, "I'm not going anywhere, Mom. Take your time." That word, Mom, hit me like a fist. The door closed. Clara came back into the living room and stood there looking at me, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her own pieces together. "I'm sorry, William. I'm so sorry." I didn't look at her. I asked, "Do you love him more than me?" Her breath caught. "What? No. That's not. It's different. He's my child. You're my husband. It's not the same kind of love, but it felt the same. It felt like I'd been replaced, like 40 years of being enough for her had just been erased by the return of a son I didn't know existed. I stood up and walked past her toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" "To bed. We'll talk tomorrow." "William, please don't." But I kept walking. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on top of the covers in my clothes and stared at the ceiling while Clara cried softly in the bathroom down the hall. By the time the sun came up, I still didn't know if I could forgive her. Not for having a son, but for hiding him. For building a life with him in secret while I walked around blind. Trust, once cracked, doesn't just heal with an apology. It takes time. Or maybe it never heals at all. What happened next tested every vow I'd ever made. Morning came cold and gray. I woke up still dressed, my back stiff from lying rigid all night. Clara's side of the bed was empty, but I could smell coffee downstairs. I sat up slow, joints aching, and caught my reflection in the mirror across the room. I looked like hell. Eyes red-rimmed, jaw tight, hair sticking up in wild tufts. I splashed water on my face in the bathroom and went downstairs. Clara was at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug, staring out the window at the frost-covered field. She'd changed into a loose sweater and jeans, but her face was puffy, exhausted. She glanced at me when I walked in. I poured myself coffee without a word and sat across from her. For a long minute, neither of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, a crow cawed from the fence post. Finally, Clara said, "I called in sick to work. I figured we needed to talk." I nodded. She took a shaky breath. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But I need you to understand that I never meant to hurt you. I kept this from you because I was ashamed. Not of Daniel. Of myself. Of the choices I made when I was young. of the fact that I gave away my own child and spent decades pretending it didn't destroy me. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and said, "You should have told me, right at the beginning, before we got married." She looked down. "I know, but I was terrified you'd see me differently, that you'd think I was damaged or dishonest." By the time we were married, it felt too late. The lie had already set in. I asked, "Do you regret marrying me?" Her head snapped up. "God, no, William. Marrying you was the best thing I ever did. You gave me a life I didn't think I deserved. You loved me when I couldn't love myself. That's why this is so hard. I don't want to lose you. But I also can't lose Daniel. Not again." There it was, the impossible choice she was asking me to accept. I took a sip of coffee, burned my tongue, didn't care. I said, "So what now? You want me to just welcome him into our lives? Pretend the last 40 years didn't happen? Sit around the dinner table like one big happy family?" She reached across the table and touched my hand. I pulled back. She flinched, but kept talking. "I don't know what I want. I just know I can't go back to pretending he doesn't exist, and I can't keep lying to you. So I'm asking, begging, for you to give me a chance to make this right." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd loved for 4 decades. The woman who used to laugh so easily, who danced with me in the kitchen to old records, who held my hand through my father's funeral and never let go. She was still that woman. But she was also someone I didn't fully know. A mother. A 17-year-old girl who made an impossible decision and carried it in silence. I didn't know if I could forgive her, but I knew I didn't want to lose her. Not yet, not without trying. I said I need time. She nodded quickly. "Of course. Take all the time you need." I set my mug down, and I need to meet him. Properly. Not in the middle of some ambush. "If he's going to be part of your life, I need to understand who he is." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you, William. Thank you." She stood and came around the table, wrapping her arms around me from behind. I sat stiff at first, but then I let myself lean into her. We stayed like that for a while, her cheek pressed against the top of my head, both of us trying to hold on to something that felt like it was slipping away. She called Daniel that afternoon. I listened from the living room as she explained that I wanted to meet him, talk things through. He agreed to come over for dinner the next evening. That gave me a day to prepare, to figure out what I wanted to say, to decide if I could really share my wife with the ghost of her past made flesh. I spent the day doing mindless tasks. Fixed the fence post that had been leaning since summer, cleaned the gutters, organized the shed. Physical work to keep my mind from spinning. Clara moved around the house quietly, giving me space. That evening, she made pot roast, my favorite, and we ate in silence. After dinner, she tried to talk again, but I told her I was tired. I went to bed early and lay there staring at the dark ceiling, wondering what the hell I'd agreed to. The next day passed in a blur. Clara cleaned the house top to bottom, nervous energy radiating off her. She baked a pie, set the table with our good dishes, changed her clothes 3 times. By the time the doorbell rang at 6, I thought she might vibrate out of her skin. I answered the door. Daniel stood on the porch holding a bottle of wine and a small bouquet of flowers. He looked uncertain. "Evening, Mr. William. Thanks for having me." I stepped aside. "Come in." He handed Clara the flowers, and she smiled, eyes wet, and said, "You didn't have to do that." He shrugged. Felt right. Dinner was awkward at first. We made small talk about the weather, the farm, Daniel's job as an architect in Cincinnati. Clara asked about his adoptive parents, and his face softened. They're great, loving, supportive. I had a good childhood. I'm not here because anything was missing. I just wanted to know where I came from. I appreciated the honesty. I asked, "What made you start looking?" He set his fork down and thought for a moment. "I turned 40 this year. Something about that milestone made me think about legacy, you know? About where I fit in the bigger picture. My adoptive parents encouraged me to search if I wanted to, so I did, and it led me here." I nodded. Clara watched us both, hopeful. I said, "Your mother?" I paused. "Clara kept you a secret because she was ashamed. But I want you to know that's not a reflection on you. You seem like a good man. He smiled a little. I appreciate that. And I don't hold anything against her. I can't imagine how hard it was. We kept eating. The tension eased slightly. By dessert, we were talking almost normally. Daniel asked about the farm, how long we'd lived here, what crops we used to grow before we retired. I found myself relaxing, even laughing once when he told a story about trying to fix his own fence and nearly getting trampled by a neighbor's goat. But then Clara said something that shattered the fragile peace. She said, "I want you to stay the night." Daniel blinked. What? She looked at me, then back at him. I have a guest room. You drove all the way from Cincinnati. It's late. Stay. We can have breakfast together. Talk more. I felt my chest tighten. Clara, that's not... I started, but she interrupted. Please, William. I missed 43 years. I just want one morning. Daniel looked uncomfortable. I don't want to impose. It's fine, I said, voice flat. Stay. Clara's face lit up. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thank you. But I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it because I wanted to see what would happen. Wanted to test whether I could actually live with this new reality, or if it would suffocate me. That night I lay in bed listening to Clara laugh downstairs with Daniel, listening to them talk late into the night. At some point I heard her come upstairs and check on him in the guest room. Heard her whisper, "Good night, sweetheart." That word, sweetheart, the same word she used to call me, felt like a knife between my ribs. I didn't sleep. The next morning I came downstairs to find them already at the table. Clara had made pancakes, bacon, fresh coffee. They were looking at old photo albums again, Daniel pointing at pictures and asking questions. Clara was glowing, radiant, happier than I'd seen her in months. I stood in the doorway watching them and realized something that made my stomach drop. I wasn't angry anymore. I was scared. Scared that I'd already lost her. That even if I forgave her, even if I accepted Daniel, I'd always be second. The husband who came after. The man who filled the void but couldn't compete with the bond between mother and son. Daniel looked up and saw me. Morning. Want some pancakes? I forced a smile. Sure. I sat down and Clara poured me coffee, kissed the top of my head. I felt nothing. We ate. They talked. I answered when spoken to, but mostly I just watched. Watched the way Clara's whole face changed when she looked at Daniel. The way she touched his arm when she laughed. The way she seemed complete in a way she never had with just me. After breakfast, Daniel said he needed to head back, but he'd love to come visit again soon. Clara walked him to his car. I watched from the window as she hugged him tight, holding on like she was afraid he'd vanish. When she came back inside, she was wiping tears but smiling. That went well, don't you think? I didn't answer. She frowned. William? I turned to her and said, I can't do this. Her smile disappeared. What? I love you. You're my husband. But I could hear the hesitation in her voice, the little crack that said she wasn't sure anymore either. I grabbed my coat. Where are you going? Out. I need to think. William, please, don't leave like this. But I walked out the door and didn't look back. I drove with no destination. Just drove until I ended up at the lake, 20 miles north. I sat on a bench by the water and stared at the gray waves. My phone buzzed. Clara texting, calling. I ignored it. Hours passed. The sun started to set. And that's when I saw him, Daniel, walking toward me along the shore. My first thought was, how did he find me? My second was, what the hell does he want now? He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. She's worried about you. Sent me to check. I laughed bitterly. Of course she did. He sat down on the other end of the bench. Look, I know this is hard. I didn't come here to ruin your marriage. That's exactly what you did. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. You're right. I stared at him. The wind off the lake cut cold between us. Daniel kept his eyes on the water, jaw working like he was chewing over words he wasn't sure he should say. Finally, he spoke again. You're right. I did ruin something. Maybe not your marriage, but the version of it you thought you had. And I'm sorry for that. I didn't ask for your apology, I said. He nodded. I know, but I'm giving it anyway. He turned to face me then, and I saw something in his expression I hadn't noticed before. Guilt. Not the shallow kind people wear to get out of trouble. Real guilt. The kind that sits heavy in your chest. He said, when I started looking for my birth mother, I told myself it was just curiosity, just filling in blanks. But that wasn't the whole truth. I wanted to matter to someone the way biology says I should. My adoptive parents are wonderful, but there's always been this voice in my head asking, why wasn't I enough for her? Why did she give me away? Meeting Clara was supposed to answer that. And it did. But it also opened something I didn't expect. He paused. She looks at me like I'm a second chance. Like loving me now makes up for losing me then. And I let her because it feels good. But it's not fair to you. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to stay angry, but his honesty punctured something. I asked, what do you want me to say? That it's okay? That I'll just step aside so you two can play house? He shook his head. No. I want you to know, I see what this is doing to you. And to her. She's torn. She loves you, but she's also trying to make up for 43 years in a few months. That's impossible. You can't speedrun a lifetime of missed moments. I looked back at the water. So what are you saying? He exhaled slow. I'm saying maybe I need to back off. Give you two space to figure out your marriage, without me in the middle of it. I can still have a relationship with Clara, but not like this. Not every week, not inserting myself into your lives. She won't like that, I said. He smiled sadly. No, she won't. But it's the right thing. We sat there in silence for a while. The sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky bruised purple. Finally, I said, why do you care? About me, I mean. You don't owe me anything. Daniel thought about that. Because you're the man who loved her when I couldn't. You gave her a life, a home, stability. That matters. And because if I destroy your marriage to get closer to her, I'm no better than the people who took me from her in the first place. That hit different. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw Clara in the shape of his eyes, the line of his jaw. But I also saw something of myself, the desire to do right, even when it's hard. I stood up. Let's go back. He stood too. You sure? I nodded. Yeah. We drove in separate cars, a quiet caravan back to the farmhouse. Clara was on the porch when we pulled up, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. Relief flooded her face. She ran down the steps and grabbed me. I thought you weren't coming back. I held her. I'm here. She pulled back and looked between me and Daniel. What happened? Did you two talk? Daniel spoke first. We did. And I think we need to set some boundaries. Her face fell. What kind of boundaries? He stepped closer and took her hands. Mom, I love that we found each other. But I can't keep showing up here like this. It's not fair to William. It's not fair to you. You have a marriage that was whole before I came along, and I don't want to be the reason it breaks. Tears filled her eyes. You're not breaking anything. But I could see she knew that wasn't entirely true. I said, Clara, I love you, but I need you to choose us. Not instead of Daniel. Just first. He can still be part of your life, but he can't be the center of it. Not if you want this marriage to survive. She looked at me, stricken. That's not fair. Life's not fair, I said quietly. You taught me that when you kept him secret for 6 months. Now I'm asking you to prove that what we built together still matters. She was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to Daniel. I don't want to lose you again. You won't, he said. I'll call. We'll meet for lunch once a month. We'll take it slow. But you need to rebuild trust with William first. That's more important right now. She cried then, the kind of deep sobs that shake your whole body. Both of us held her. Me on one side and Daniel on the other. And it felt surreal, like we were sharing the weight of her grief. After a while, she pulled herself together and wiped her face. Okay. Once a month. Phone calls. We'll go slow. Daniel hugged her. I'll call you next week. And then he looked at me and extended his hand. I shook it. Take care of her. I plan to, I said. He left. Clara and I stood on the porch watching his taillights disappear down the road. She leaned into me. "I'm sorry, William, for all of it." I kissed the top of her head. "I know." We went inside. That night we talked for hours. Really talked. She told me everything. The fear she felt at 17. The shame her parents drilled into her. The way she used to imagine her son's face on every young man she passed on the street. The relief of finally meeting Daniel and knowing he was okay. And the guilt of realizing that relief came at my expense. I told her about the 3 days in the motel. The paranoia. The anger. The fear that I wasn't enough for her anymore. We cried together. We fought a little. We made promises to be honest, to protect what we had, to let Daniel in, but not at the cost of us. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a happy ending tied in a bow. But it was real. Over the next few months, things slowly got better. Clara and Daniel met for lunch once a month like he promised. She'd come home and tell me about their conversations. And I'd listen because I knew it mattered to her. I even joined them a few times. It was strange at first, sitting across the table from the son my wife gave up decades ago. But Daniel made it easy. He never pushed, never tried to replace me. He was just a man getting to know his mother and respecting the life she'd built. One afternoon in early spring, 6 months after that terrible night I came home early, Clara and I were working in the garden. She was planting tomatoes, and I was fixing the irrigation line. She stopped and looked at me. "William, do you forgive me?" I set down the wrench. "I'm working on it." She nodded. "That's fair." Then she said something that surprised me. "I forgive you too." I frowned. For what? For testing me. For not trusting me enough to just ask. "I know why you did it, and I understand, but it hurt." I sat back on my heels. "You're right. I should have confronted you instead of playing games. We were both wrong." She smiled a little. "Yeah, we were, but we're still here." I reached over and took her dirt-covered hand. "Yeah, we are." That's when I realized something. The story I'd been telling myself, that my wife betrayed me and I was the victim, wasn't complete. The truth was messier. She'd lied. I'd schemed. We'd both protected ourselves at the expense of the other. But we'd also both chosen to stay and fight for what we had. That counted for something. Maybe everything. Daniel called that evening and asked if he could come by on Sunday, said he had something he wanted to talk about. Clara agreed. When he arrived, he looked nervous. We sat in the living room and he said, "I wanted to tell you both something. I'm getting married." Clara gasped and threw her arms around him. "Oh my God, congratulations. Who is she?" He laughed and pulled out his phone, showed us pictures of a woman named Lena. Dark curly hair, bright smile. They'd been dating for 2 years. The wedding was in October. He looked at me. "I'd like you both to come, if that's okay." I glanced at Clara. She was beaming, tears in her eyes. I looked back at Daniel. "We'd be honored." He grinned. "And, I was hoping maybe you'd walk down the aisle with my mom. My adoptive dad is walking with my other mom. But I'd like Clara to be there too. And I thought, since you're her partner, it'd be right if you walked together." Something in my chest loosened. I nodded. "Yeah, we can do that." Clara reached over and squeezed my hand. Daniel looked relieved. "Thank you, both of you, for giving this a chance, for letting me in without tearing everything apart." "We didn't let you in," I said. "We made room. There's a difference." The wedding was beautiful. October again, full circle from the night, everything fell apart. Clara wore a deep blue dress and held my arm as we walked Daniel's birth mother down the aisle. It was strange and lovely and bittersweet all at once, watching him marry Lena, seeing the life he'd built, understanding that Clara's choice all those years ago led to this moment. Afterward at the reception, Daniel pulled me aside. "Thank you for not giving up on her, on us." I shook his hand. "You gave me a reason to fight for my marriage." "I didn't know I needed that until you showed up." He smiled. "Funny how that works." We stood there watching Clara dance with his adoptive mother, both of them laughing. And I thought about how much grace it takes to share love, to let people be complicated, to forgive the unforgivable and build something new from the broken pieces. That's what haunts me. Not the betrayal, not the lie, but the realization that love isn't enough on its own. It takes trust and honesty and the willingness to break before you bend. Clara and I almost didn't make it, but we did, and that makes all the difference. A year later, I found myself standing in the same living room where everything unraveled. But this time, I wasn't reeling from betrayal. I was hanging pictures. Clara had printed and framed photos from Daniel's wedding. One of the four of us, me and Clara and Daniel and Lena, all smiling under the October trees. Another of Clara and Daniel, embracing her hand on his cheek, both of them teary. She wanted them on the wall next to our own wedding photo. I hesitated at first. It felt like reopening a wound. But Clara said, "Please, William, this is part of our story now." And I realized she was right. Our story wasn't just the two of us anymore. It was bigger, messier, fuller. I hung the pictures. That evening we sat on the porch with coffee, watching the sun go down over the fields. Clara rested her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" "Regret what?" "Staying, giving me another chance." I thought about that. There were days, especially in the beginning, when I wanted to walk away, when the weight of her secret felt too heavy and I didn't think I could carry it. But those days passed. And what replaced them was something I didn't expect. Gratitude. Not for the pain, but for what it taught me. That people are more than their worst mistakes. That love is a choice you make over and over, not a feeling that just happens. That forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about deciding the future matters more than the past. I told her no. I don't regret it. She squeezed my hand. "I don't deserve you." I smiled. "You're right. But I don't deserve you either. So, I guess we're even." She laughed, the sound light and easy, and I realized I hadn't heard her laugh like that in a long time. It felt good. A few months later, Daniel and Lena told us they were expecting a boy. They wanted to name him William. I cried when they said it. Not sad tears, something else. Relief, maybe. Or just the overwhelming sense that the mess we'd waded through had led to something good. When the baby was born in the spring, Clara and I drove to Cincinnati to meet him. Tiny thing, all pink skin and squeezed shut eyes. Clara held him and wept. I stood beside her and put my arm around her shoulders. She looked up at me. "We're grandparents." I nodded. "Yeah, we are." It was strange and wonderful and complicated. This child wasn't ours in the traditional sense, but he was ours in all the ways that mattered. Blood and choice and love woven together into something I didn't have a name for. On the drive home, Clara said, "Do you think we'll ever stop feeling like we're making this up as we go?" I laughed. "Probably not, but that's okay. We've gotten pretty good at it." That summer, we hosted a barbecue at the farm. Daniel and Lena came with little William. Clara's sister drove down. A few neighbors stopped by. It was loud and chaotic and full of life. At one point, I stood by the grill flipping burgers and watched Clara sitting in the grass with the baby in her lap, Daniel beside her. Both of them laughing at something Lena said. I thought about the night I faked that business trip. The anger and fear and heartbreak. How close we came to losing everything. And I thought about the choice I made to stay, to fight, to forgive. It wasn't easy. It still isn't, some days. There are moments when the old hurt flares up, when I remember the months she lied, and I feel that twist in my chest. But then I look at her, at the life we've built, at the family we've become, and I know I made the right choice. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present, about showing up even when it's hard, about choosing each other even when you're not sure you can. One evening in late fall, Clara and I were sitting by the fire. She was reading, and I was half watching a baseball game on low volume. Out of nowhere, she said, "I never thanked you." For what? For not leaving. For giving me the chance to make this right. I set down the remote. "You did thank me. Like 100 times." She shook her head. No, I mean really thank you. You could have walked away and no one would have blamed you. I lied to you for months. I built a whole secret life, and you stayed anyway. That takes a kind of strength I'm not sure I would have had. I reached over and took her hand. You would have. You're stronger than you think. She smiled, but her eyes were wet. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm grateful every day. I pulled her close, and we sat there in the firelight, her head on my chest, both of us quiet. And I realized that's what haunts me now. Not the betrayal, not the pain, but the knowledge of how fragile everything is. How close we came to shattering. How easily trust breaks, and how hard it is to rebuild. But also how worth it that work is. Because on the other side of the breaking is something deeper. A love that's been tested and didn't fail. A marriage that bent but didn't snap. I used to think love was about never doubting, never hurting, never questioning. But I was wrong. Love is about doubting and staying anyway. It's about being hurt and choosing to heal together. It's about questioning everything and still deciding that this person, this life, is worth it. Clara fell asleep against me. I stayed awake a while longer, staring into the flames, thinking about the long road we'd walked to get here. The next morning I woke up before her, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window watching the frost melt off the fields. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Hey William, thank you for everything. Lena and I were talking last night about how lucky we are to have you both in our lives. You didn't have to accept me, but you did. That means the world. I typed back, you're family now. That's what family does. He sent a heart emoji. I smiled and pocketed the phone. Clara came downstairs in her robe, hair messy, eyes still sleepy. She poured herself coffee and stood next to me at the window. What are you thinking about? I wrapped an arm around her. How we almost lost this. She nodded. But we didn't. No, I said. We didn't. She kissed my cheek. I love you, William. I love you too. We stood there together as the sun climbed higher, warming the frost into dew, turning the gray fields golden. And I thought about the title that started all this. I faked a business trip to test my wife. What I discovered still haunts me. It does haunt me, but not in the way I expected. It haunts me because it showed me the truth, that my wife is human, flawed, scared, carrying wounds I never knew about, and that I'm human too, capable of jealousy and pettiness and fear, but also capable of forgiveness, of growth, of love that doesn't quit, even when it has every reason to. The moral I learned isn't a simple one. It's not, don't test your partner or always tell the truth or even love conquers all. It's messier than that. It's that relationships are built on more than honesty. They're built on grace, on the willingness to see your partner's brokenness and not run, on the choice to stay when staying is hard, on the understanding that everyone carries secrets, and sometimes those secrets aren't weapons, they're scars. Clara's secret wasn't meant to hurt me. It was a wound she didn't know how to show. And my test wasn't about catching her. It was about my own fear that I wasn't enough. We were both wrong. We were both scared. And we both had to decide if the love we'd built was stronger than the pain we'd caused. It was. Barely. But it was. And that's what haunts me. The knowledge that love is fragile and fierce all at once. That it can survive almost anything if you're willing to fight for it. But it can also die if you let fear win. I didn't let fear win. Neither did Clara. And because of that, we're still here. Still standing at this window. Still drinking coffee as the sun rises. Still choosing each other every single day. That's the story. Not a fairy tale. Not a tragedy. Just two people who broke and healed and learned that love isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. I'm reading and replying to every comment under this post. Tell me, have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between your fear and your love? What did you choose? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about your own relationships, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because we all carry secrets. We all make mistakes. And we all deserve the chance to be forgiven. Before you go, I want to leave you with this. The people we love will hurt us. That's inevitable. But the question isn't whether they'll hurt us. It's whether we'll let that hurt define us or refine us. Clara and I chose refinement. It wasn't easy. Some days, it still isn't. But it's worth it. Every single day. It's worth it. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If you want more stories like this, real and raw and unfiltered, subscribe to Deserved Revenge. Because life isn't clean. It's complicated. And that's where the real stories live. Until next time, choose love, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard.